The People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Tomorrow's Match of the Day will focus on match action without studio presenters or pundits. That's according to a BBC spokesperson. It comes after several football commentators, including Alan Shearer and Ian Wright, have said they won't feature on Saturday's show after Gary Lineker was told by the broadcaster to step back from presenting Match of the Day until an agreement's been reached on his social media usage. That follows comments he made on Twitter criticising the government's new asylum policy. He likened the language used to that of 1930s Germany. In a statement, the BBC said, "We've never said that Gary can't have a view on issues that matter to him, but he should keep well away from taking sides on party political issues or political controversies." Bec2, the largest union in the BBC, has called it deeply concerning and is accusing the broadcaster of bowing to political pressure. Rishi Sunak has agreed to give France almost £500 million over the next 3 years in an attempt to end the Channel migrant crisis. The Prime Minister held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris today before announcing the landmark deal which will see a new detention centre established in France. The joint news conference followed the first bilateral summit between the two countries in 5 years. Mr Sunak says the new illegal migrant legislation introduced this week supports this new deal.
We're announcing a new detention centre in northern France, a new command centre bringing our enforcement teams together in one place for the first time, and an extra 500 new officers patrolling French beaches, all underpinned by more drones and other surveillance technologies that will help ramp up the interception rate. And the legislation the UK has introduced this week supports this, because it's designed to break the business model of the criminal gangs and remove the pull factors bringing them to the Channel coast.
German police have said they've made an arrest following a hostage situation in the city of Karlsruhe, where 2 people were being held. It follows the mass shooting at a Jehovah's Witness hall in Hamburg, where at least 8 people died, including a woman and her unborn baby. Police say the gunman, German national Philip F., acted alone. He later took his own life. His motives were unknown. They say the 35-year-old was a former member of the Jehovah's Witness community. He had no criminal record and possibly suffered from mental illness. And heavy snowfall left drivers stranded for hours this morning, with people now being asked to only travel if necessary. Storm Larissa hit the UK overnight, causing flights to be suspended and rail services delayed as fallen trees blocked some rail lines. The Met Office has yellow warnings for snow and ice in place for parts of the UK over this coming weekend. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's over to headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Stephen Allen. It's your first look at Saturday's most important and fascinating stories. Joining me tonight are Leo Kirst and Nick Dixon. And before we get stuck into the rest of the stories, what have you seen in the papers that has made you laugh, Leo? And we all worry what makes you laugh in your spare time.
Yeah, well, I saw a story about an 80-year-old trucker who's decided she's transgender, so she's a woman now, and says his wife has Alzheimer's, but I know she'd want me to live as the woman I've always been. That's why I waited till she had Alzheimer's to do it. I don't know, like my friend's mum's got Alzheimer's, and she says it's great because at Christmas she can just rip up wrapping paper, scatter it around her and say, "Did you enjoy your present, Mum?"
Oddly, if I were to guess what kind of stories make you laugh in your spare time, that was bang on the money.
Yeah.
That's got truck drivers, trans issues, Alzheimer's. It's like someone got ChatGPT to write as a news story.
Yeah.
And we should do that more often. Nick, what's the one that's tickled your fancy?
Mine's far lighter, Steve. A couple getting married decided to use instant mash instead of confetti. And it doesn't say, but I assume they must be from the north. Such a northern thing and such a money-saving thing. But it went awry when everything became mash. It mixed with the sweat and spilled drinks. And the whole wedding just became a kind of just mash frenzy.
Like an Ibiza foam party.
Yeah, but with mash.
I mean, tasty, and also, therefore, you don't have to worry about laying on a buffet for the guests at the reception.
Multitasking.
You may now lick the bride.
Right, so let's have a look at Saturday's front pages. The Daily Mail, mutiny at BBC over Lineker red card. The Telegraph goes with BBC faces revolt over Lineker. You'll spot the theme. Guardian, Lineker suspended from BBC over social media row. Express goes otherwise. Rishi's £478 million deal. I said we would stop boats. The Times, mutiny on mutiny of the day gets Star support. And finally, the Daily Star, the Beeb's gone to VAR. And those were your front pages. So we begin with the Daily Mail, and I mean, it's the biggest story of the day, Leo.
Yeah, so the BBC has said that Gary Lineker will not appear on Match of the Day this weekend. This comes after Gary Lineker criticised our government's plan to solve the small boats migrant crisis, and he compared our government to Nazi Germany's government, which is pretty ridiculous. You know, people have said it's offensive to victims of Nazi's government. I think it's more offensive to the Nazis who could get trains to run on time. And it is ridiculous. I mean, as if the Nazis were a multiracial party presiding over a proudly multicultural, multi-ethnic country and had equal rights enshrined in law to protect people. People risked their lives to leave Nazi Germany. Ethnic minorities risked their lives to leave Nazi Germany, not to get into it. Britain's such a tolerant and bountiful place that people are, you know, travelling through all these different countries to get here. They could stay in France, but they know that Britain's better, so they're trying to get here. And the Nazis were trying to expand their borders, not control their borders.
Yeah.
There's quite a few differences.
I mean, the pushback that would be, that I've certainly seen people do on social media, saying that his tweet wasn't even saying the plan is like a Nazi plan. He was saying the rhetoric, the language used. Which might be splitting hairs, but it's worth throwing in.
No, I mean, I think it's... people have said that, but is he saying that Hitler's speeches... We've seen Hitler's speeches. Some of us might have seen too many, but like, we've seen Hitler's speeches. To compare Hitler's rhetoric and the things that he said at those rallies and the things that he wrote in books to what the government says and does is absolutely abhorrent.
You're saying Hitler was a more effective speaker than anyone we have at the moment.
He was. I mean, yeah.
Again, still on bad. But we've fallen into the trap. We're having a debate about whether the tweet was good or bad, but we can all agree people are allowed to bad tweet. Well, so the debate is, should he be allowed to say it?
Well, this is the thing. He shouldn't be sacked. He shouldn't be made to stand down, because it's better if people are allowed to say those things and you can see what they say, so it's in plain sight.
Well, it's all a question of impartiality, isn't it? Normally, yes, you'd say you should be able to say what you want. The question is, if you extract a licence fee from people, should you therefore just be able to mouth off on Twitter saying obnoxious things about current political hot topics? That's the question. I say probably not. But it's up to the BBC. But it's just an ego trip for Lineker. He's like mateless, Emily Mateless. He's got too big for the BBC, doesn't want to follow their rules. He should go and have an LBC show where he gets to express the views that we all knew he had anyway forever because he hasn't hidden them. It's been so absurd to watch on Twitter, like Alistair Campbell defending him. Lo and behold, Alistair Campbell's podcast is funded by Gary Lineker's production company. So it's like a kind of Ponzi scheme of virtue signaling. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, we've seen his response to Douglas Murray. Did you see this? Douglas Murray said, yes, famously, when people expressed dissent to the Nazis, they got lauded with praise all over. And Gary Lineker's response to that was, well, there wasn't social media then. I mean, it's extraordinary. So he's in this delusional world where he thinks it's like Nazi Germany. Or is he just virtue signaling to the Metro Lib dinner party set?
But is there a difference? I mean, you're saying because it's licence fee funded, that's a really important thing. We're paying for it. But he's not saying this stuff at work. So are we saying because you get paid via the licence fee, we're in control of you 24/7, baby, we can shut you down?
Well, in fact, one of his excuses, one of his defences for trying to avoid paying so much tax, he was being chased for something like £5 million of tax by HMRC, and he said, oh, look, no, I'm a freelancer because I say all this crazy stuff, all this political stuff that isn't linked to my job on social media. That was one of his defences, which seems ridiculous. And it's doubly ironic when Alistair Campbell is coming out and standing up for him. Alistair Campbell, remember, was one of the architects of the invasion of Iraq that ended up killing up to, 1.5 million people and precipitated the migrant crisis that led to so many people coming here. I mean, Alistair...
We're doing that thing again of getting into the side branches. This is not about whether it should be taken off Match of the Day for it. It's easily as wrong he gets paid that much.
The hypocrisy of the left is absolutely core to this. I mean, virtue signalling on immigration is a classic thing that they do. He's not offering solutions. He's saying, oh, we should let everybody in. We should live in this utopia where that's not a workable solution.
The thing is, Lineker won't be affected by it. Whether it's really the left, because I think that's almost unfair to the left. There are people who have, who are sort of intellectual people on the left. Lineker's just, is it even the left? Or is it just a kind of weird Metro Lib set? They all have to have certain high status opinions. One of which is Tories bad.
But again, we don't need to agree with what he's saying. It's more like he's not a news person either. He's a sports presenter. So as long as he's unbiased about who's the best kicker, I don't really know football. It's like no one really cares if the weatherman's pro-Brexit, and no one knows if whoever's on CBeebies has got a thing about
Here's one argument. It's up to the BBC. Here's one argument. I know people who work for the BBC behind the scenes, and they're all trying very hard to be impartial. Then you have Lineker giving it the big one there, on this ridiculous wage. And it's just very frustrating for people who are trying to make the BBC impartial and answer their critics on that. And then you just get people like Lineker kind of ruining it for them. So that's one criticism. So it's, the BBC may well be, reasonable to say you shouldn't be able to do this while working for us. So that's one argument for it. But one thing they're doing, by all boycotting Match of the Day, they're in danger of rendering themselves obsolete when we all realise it's just a football show. You barely even need them. You know what I mean?
When it says that the show's going to go ahead with no presenters, I just imagine pictures of footballers with Tony Hart's The Gallery music playing. And I think that'll be brilliant. I'd actually watch that. I can't stand football.
But they could just like try someone new for like a tiny fraction of the fee. Find out they're just as good at saying, and here's United versus Leicester, and then it's over.
And take that money and actually make some TV shows with it.
$1.5 million.
Crazy ideas. Next up, we move to the Express, Nick. What are they going with?
Yeah, it's the boats. It's Rishi's $478 million deal. I said we would stop boats. And, of course, he's referring to his 5 pledges. When you make a pledge, Steve, as a politician, you have to stick to it. So he's made this pledge, and he's now in a deal with Macron, which is a sort of... I mean, people are saying 500 million. That's, I guess, rounding up. And the idea is... I mean, I don't know how it's actually going to work, but that's, that's secondary. But Rishi has a sort of better relationship with Macron than previous leaders. They didn't really understand Boris and his jokes and his weird vibe. They didn't really like Theresa May. Macron and Rishi are more similar, aren't they, type of managerial sort of politicians.
Let's not forget Liz Truss.
They didn't like Liz Truss because immediately she said, well, I'm not sure if Macron's a friend or foe, which isn't really diplomacy 101. So Macron is getting on better with Rishi, and maybe this is... I mean, look, I don't have a better idea. I don't know if this idea is going to work, to just give France a load of money to have detention centres in northern France. This is the idea. No idea if it'll work, but at least we're trying something, I suppose. I would just stick them all in a helicopter and dump them in France, but that's... not for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the political will is necessarily there in France to sort of stop these people coming to the UK. Not that I'm saying a country might not want some of these people coming over, but yeah, I think it depends on the political will in France and just the sort of incentive isn't really there to stop them.
As much as you're right, they're rounding the number up, but let's be honest, it'll cost that anyway, because there's never been a government idea that's not cost more money by the end of it. Money well spent? I mean, is this the only thing? Yes, but give France even more money? Because it's not the first time we've done it.
I think if we just copied the Australian model, then that's proven to work. It reduced small boat arrivals, or big boat arrivals even, by down to pretty much zero. And what they do is they process people offshore, and if you enter the country illegally, then you instantly revoke all right to ever have UK citizenship.
But the geography's different. We don't own an island that you can do that with unless we use the Isle of Wight for it or something like that.
Use the Isle of Wight for it.
Yeah, well, our big problem was people found out you could cross the sea. Yeah. That was the big problem. We were keeping it going just as an illusion, like, ooh, don't go across the sea. Then they found out you could, and now we're basically like United States now with Mexico. It's like we have a land border because no one's scared of coming across the sea anymore. So we need to increase the fear of the sea again. Yeah. Maybe that's what the 500 million will go on.
Yeah.
Maybe poster campaign, avoid the sea.
Well, instead of reintroducing wolves and bears to the Highlands, we can reintroduce crocodiles.
Oh, those giant squid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loch Ness. I mean, she's been sitting around doing nothing other than upsetting the 3 tourists a year.
Great point.
Get her down there.
Yeah. We don't know it's a woman. It's Scotland, so Loch Ness.
Is Nessie not a female name?
Well, it's Scotland, so it could be any gender.
I knew you'd get back to it. I'm amazed we've gone 14 minutes without. We finished this section with the Telegraph. Leo, what are they going with?
So they've got Jeremy Hunt saying, we can learn from the Swedish lockdown. This is what I was saying during our lockdown. But yeah, the Swedish lockdown, people said, well, yeah, they've got a lot of freedom. It hasn't affected their economy as much. But I bet we'll see that loads of them have died when all this is over. And it could take ages to find out. And it's like, no, straight away we've found out they've had half the death toll of Britain. So they've been much more, not having a lockdown is much better for you than having a lockdown.
Is that half of as an absolute figure or a relative?
Proportionate. Right. Proportionate. So per 100,000, it's I can't remember exactly what the figures are, but yeah, a really startlingly lower proportion of people died in Sweden, and also the amount of debt that the Swedish people have been burdened with is much low. So it's £3,000 per person, as opposed to nearly £9,000 per person in the UK that we're going to have to pay back to pay for all the lockdown. I mean, part of the reason is Swedish people. Part of the reason lockdown, or a lack of lockdown, would work in Sweden is because they sort of follow rules without having them mandated by police. So if you tell British people, you've got to get out of the pub, nobody gets out of the pub. So in Sweden, they get out of the pub. That's the kind of culture they've got.
Yeah. Is that the lesson we want to learn, though, and then change us to a nation of people who get out of pubs? I think you might have lost the dressing room on that one comment. Everyone was with you up until we've got to leave a pub. Nick, your take on this.
Well, it's very frustrating for people like Hunt to pipe up now. People like Hunt who were going on about how great the sort of East Asian approach was, and how his sister was locked away for ages and was rejoicing about that. I've never met his sister, but he was rejoicing in the ultra-authoritarian approach. And now he's going, oh, we can learn from Sweden. Like, yeah, cheers, mate. We should never have had a lockdown. We're seeing now with the lockdown files, it was all nonsense, and people were even worried in lockdown messages about the Sweden narrative, and they've been trying to suppress the Sweden narrative. Yeah. Sweden presents a huge problem for them because it proves basically that you don't need lockdowns. And that's what they're now sort of, some people are waking up to. At least is admitting it now. Some people are still doubling down, claiming lockdowns worked when they didn't, and they were a disaster.
Some people are still wearing face masks.
Madness. Yeah. I know, it's madness.
Mainly so you don't get recognised, or bank robbing, isn't it? That's mainly why I do it. The part of the counter, which I think adds into this, and actually isn't a counter, it's just more info. When we're learning from this, we would also have to consider population density, geography, and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean you don't learn from it.
But they always say that population density, as if we're like living on lighthouses and stuff.
The Swedish population is mainly concentrated in big cities like the UK, and the UK's got plenty of sparsely populated places. Look at Scotland.
Plenty of room. We should open those borders. I'm glad we got around to that part.
That is not what I said.
Not what you said,
Steve.
That's the front pages done then. So coming up after the break, we've got why you might be drinking seawater in the future, why David Attenborough's gone right-wing, according to the BBC, and exciting political agreements.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Stephen Allen, Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. So let's jump straight back in. Saturday's Telegraph, Nick. Turns out that Sunak and Macron aren't the only ones who can manage to do a bit of a deal thing.
Yeah, China brokers deal for Iran and Saudi Arabia to resume diplomatic relations. So this is really a story about, I mean, there's a guy here from the RUSI who says this is a big deal. And I suppose that's a kind of a pun. It's a big deal in every sense. It's a deal and it's a big, you got what I was saying.
No, talk us through it again, Nick.
It's really the world moving from the sort of neocon era of the US doing all their stuff in the Middle East, expansionism, messing around and ruining countries in the Middle East. They've now said, we've had enough of that. And instead, China is stepping into that gap, and they're going to be the people who work with the Middle East. So it's a kind of scary, sometimes it gets called the New World Order. But then people think you're talking about the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. But it's just the rearrangement of states, and it's just a significant moment in that. And apparently, the United States imports less than 10% of its oil from Saudi Arabia, whereas the vast majority of Beijing's energy needs are met by the Gulf and Iran. So it's China establishing themselves in the Middle East and the US retreating a little bit from that.
Yeah, and owning parts of Africa and the
South America.
Yeah, and Australia and everywhere. I should imagine there's parts of Britain as well. But I mean, this is a more a sign that they want to appease China than any sort of peace deal is coming in between Iran and Saudi Arabia. They're still involved in a proxy war in Yemen, so they're still ripping chunks out of each other. And yeah, the US used to be heavily involved in the Gulf because that's where it got its oil from. Now they're getting oil from their own, from themselves, and they're self-sufficient in oil, something that the UK could try and do. And oil is less strategically important. It's sort of being phased out and being replaced by, electric stuff. So, 20 years' time, we're not going to need as much oil.
But does that mean fewer... this is going to sound so Western biased, but does that mean fewer Western countries pay attention to that area? Because, what do we care about oil? And then who knows what's going to happen over there? No one else worried? Or is that just really offensive?
I was just thinking, surely we're allowed to be a little bit Western biased. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I doubt that on China's version of headliners, they're going, well, don't be too biased towards the East.
How come Britain's the only country in the world where you've got to absolutely hate your own country?
Yeah, well,
and
Steve's a lefty.
elevate every other country above yourself? I think we can just leave the Middle East alone. They were doing fine, ripping chunks out of each other before we got involved and started ripping chunks out of them as well. Why don't, we just leave them to it?
Well, let's see what happens. Thankfully, none of us will be around long enough to see the ultimate end of that one. Well, Saturday's Telegraph, Leo, and the leaks about WhatsApp have been giving us some info that we nearly managed to beat America when it came to race riots. Nearly had our own.
Yeah. So ministers feared being labelled racist if they spoke out about the spread of COVID and also implemented lockdowns fairly. So one of the biggest concerns surrounding race was the implementation of local lockdowns in 2020, when the virus was spreading more in sort of deprived, densely populated areas with large Asian populations, because they tend to live in more intergenerational households. So the kids will, run around in the park, catch COVID off each other, not get sick, but they bring it home and infect the rest of the family, and then the elderly parents who live at home catch them. And this is why it's wonderful that we've got this tradition in the West of just shutting our old people away in a nursing home. So then the kids can't give them COVID. And also, we don't need to talk to them. Who wants to talk to them? Anyway, if my dad's watching, I don't think they've got TV in that place. Anyway, so the health secretary worried that you'd appear racist for locking down those communities, the Asian communities where it was spreading more, and not locking down the white communities. So I think they just locked down the white communities as well to not look racist. Another example of policy being led by politics rather than science. People say, follow the science. Oh, we're just following the science. No, you weren't. You're playing politics. You're scared of looking racist. And fear of looking racist leads to terrible things, by the way. There's not just the grooming gangs, but the Manchester Arena bomber. The security guard was like, well, I didn't stop this man with a rucksack who's sweaty and fidgeting and looked like a Hollywood terrorist. I didn't stop him because I was afraid of looking racist.
Yeah. Grooming gangs is the obvious analogy, though in this case there was a very easy solution. Don't do lockdowns at all. Could, of course, would have been my argument, because they're worrying about, if we lock down them and all them, well, just don't do a disastrous policy that doesn't work and is going to destroy our economy. It was so bad that Nadine Dorries was the voice of sanity. She was saying the R rate's low in these communities. You can't possibly lock these people down and ruin their jobs and businesses when the community right next to them is, ignoring all the rules and just... So Hancock was worried about looking racist. Nadine Dorries in the messages was more worried about the race riot element of the white working class, as she put it, rebelling, saying, hang on, you're treating us differently to these other communities. So, the whole thing was an absolute nightmare. As, not surprising with the lockdown files, everything we've learned is as awful or even worse than we thought.
Yeah, it's the great thing about Matt Hancock. Any TV show he goes on to try and show us who he really is, shows us who he really is. And that seems like a really bad PR policy for him. Saturday's Mirror now, Nick, and is David Attenborough politically biased? Surely he's a Tory. He did a show called Blue Planet.
Yeah, so this is BBC decide not to broadcast David Attenborough episode over right-wing backlash fears. So the idea, I mean, imagine this. Imagine how lefty and smug a show must be for the BBC not to show it because they're worried it'll... look at the stuff they do show. But yeah, I'm not quite sure how it would have worked, but it was about rewilding and the beauty of nature. And it was probably really annoying, I imagine. I hate the idea of rewilding. I'm from the country. I don't really want to come across like a saber-toothed tiger or whatever it is because they brought buffalo back. It's already weird enough when you're out there in the fields as you're like, is that a bull or a cow? We don't want... Rewilding is bad. But anyway, this was going to be about rewilding. And Attenborough really bothers me because he's one of these Malthusians. He's always on about the population being too high. And it's always like, well, then what are you going to do about it, David? They always want to live.
Well, to be fair, he's probably going to die in a relatively short amount of time.
But he has lived very long time, hasn't he? Let's face it, Steve. So, he's lived a long time with it. But they want the population to be reduced. And as far as I can see, there was a clip I was watching of him and he's like saying, this kind of thing couldn't happen. And it was like a leopard going into a house and sort of wandering around. And because of that, we're all supposed to just off ourselves. They want this kind of weird utopia. it's just like animals and about 10 people.
And also managed land, like for example, managed grouse moors provide a much better habitat than just open moorland. The heather is burnt, so you get different levels, that different growth rates that support all kinds of plants and animals, not just grouse. You get orchids, all kinds of rare flora and fauna, and also the land is owned by somebody, and they've got to turn a profit. The next most profitable use for grouse moors is usually blanket coniferous forestry, which is a monoculture. It's devastating for the land, acidifies watercourses. It's terrible. I think though this is the BBC. As with the Gary Lineker thing, this is the BBC pretending that they've got to either cancel Gary Lineker or cancel this documentary because of right-wing people to turn people against right-wing people.
Yeah. I mean, having said everything we said, I would have still obviously shown it, because if only to not give the Mirror annoying stories like this. I mean, show the stupid stuff.
Nobody would have complained about some documentary that David Attenborough... When's anybody ever... Like, the Tories have praised all the previous documentaries with David Attenborough.
The episode where you got a bottlenose dolphin that actually had a bottle, or something like that, when the fish got in a bottle and he was saying, like, this is the future. There were loads of complaints about that.
Has he not seen those ships? How do they... I mean, if you think...
Get the dolphin inside the bottle.
If he thinks it's weird that a fish can get in a bottle, wait until he sees a whole little model of it.
He does great work when he sticks to animals. That Dynasties was great, about the alpha chimp trying to secure its legacy and all this kind of thing. Brilliant stuff. But when it gets onto, and this is why you should all be killed, and that's where I turn off.
I don't think that's an episode.
Yeah. Well, that's...
Maybe he's turned.
I'm paraphrasing.
Saturday's Times, after being rained on for the last few days, it's really nice to catch up on the latest on the drought in the UK.
Yeah, so drought fears are fueling a race to use seawater for drinking water. But don't worry, it gets some sort of processing, so it's not too salty. So Thames Water is rushing to complete maintenance on its Beckton desalination plant, which is a big desalination plant. Is it the biggest in Europe? I'm not sure, but South West Water are planning to open 2 more desalination plants. And this is mad. When we go to the Middle East, like to Dubai or whatever, the water comes from the sea and it's desalinated in these big plants. It's quite an energy-intensive process, and it's mad that we're the weather here is now so good that we're having to do it here as well, so we won't need to go on holiday.
Yeah. What about this, Nick? Because our seawater tends to have weird brown things floating in it thanks to the water companies. So you're hoping to get that in your drink?
Well, I'm hoping it's going to be very good desalination. I mean, although someone here is already calling it too little, too late, which scares me a bit. I don't understand. I'm from the lakes, so I'm one of these people who doesn't understand where all our water goes. We seem to mismanage it. Though I am a bit worried. I mean, Michael Burry, at the end of the Big Short movie, he famously predicted the 2008 crash, and then it says at the end the only thing he invests in now is water. I'm like, I don't like the sound of that, because that probably means there's some sort of water crash coming, which I'm no expert, but that sounds bad.
But he was right once. He was right once about mortgages, and even that almost didn't pay off for him. That's why they managed to make a film about it.
Well, that's only because people ignored him and thought he was wrong.
Yeah, people ignored him and thought he was wrong, and it only just paid off for him. And so I think
So you're saying we won't run out of water?
That's not a shining example. It's somebody winning 5.
I was just trying to add some colour to a story about water.
All right,
It's quite boring.
Still, there's that documentary Mad Max. You want to watch out if it happens like that. Ooh, dear. Coming up, why teenagers are addicted to porn, why you won't be able to get married in prison, and Lanzarote thinks Brits are too grotty. We'll see you in a tick.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners, Saturday's Guardian, Nick, and if you believe the old wives' tale, this is some good news for Specsavers.
Yeah, a fifth of teenagers watch porn frequently. Reassuringly low. We all thought it was much, much higher than a fifth.
What's wrong with them?
Good news. And some are addicted, unfortunately. And this is a study of 14 to 18-year-olds. And it is pretty dark. I mean, the head teacher said that the impact of violent pornography on our pupils is so severe that they have to use special training to respond to this large rise in reports of sexual abuse. Now, what you wonder is that really from porn, or is it that we're in a sort of post-Me Too era where lots of things get classed as sexual abuse? And since it's The Guardian, I have to ask that question, because, you know, I don't know which one it is. But not to minimise the threat of porn, if you want to call it that, because, of course, it's a terrible thing that kids are all watching this stuff. And, yeah, I think the fact that they're saying we saw the number of students reporting sexual assault start to increase 7 to 8 years ago. Again, is it just the increasingly wide definition of sexual assault, or is it porn? I'm not saying porn is great for teenagers to be watching and addicted to, though.
Yeah, but I mean, I've got to say, like, one in five, that's like, if we'd have had access to the internet when I was a teenager, like, it would have been 5 in 5. So I don't know what's going on there, but it's having an impact. This access to porn is having an impact. Like, young women are having more sex than they really feel comfortable with, sex that makes them feel dirty and doing things purely for the man's pleasure. But there's probably some downsides as well that I haven't seen. But porn these days can give young people unrealistic expectations about sex and life and all the rest of it. So I think they can expect that somebody is going to turn up to fix the washing machine when we all know you're just going to get a card through the door and you're going to have to use that to bring yourself off.
I thought you were building to a serious point there, Leo. It was a good joke. I'm stunned.
It's because it was 2 jokes in a row, isn't it?
It was 2 jokes, yeah. I thought he's doing a serious thing now. No, he's come for it again.
Yeah, no, people have been saying porn, since the dawn of time. I bet, like, whoever was around, whoever the Green Party were in the caves, were like, oh, we've got to get these cave etchings off the wall because they're corrupting the children's minds. It's like porn has been, this demon forever.
Yeah, but it is also out of control and corrupting the children's minds. There's that as well.
I think there's other stuff that's corrupting the children's mind. Most of the stuff that's in The Guardian, they're all like, oh, we must have these sex workshops where drag queens, show children their testicles. And it's like, no, we don't. We don't need that. And also that stuff, I think when people watch porn, they know it's fake and they know it's something that's naughty and just purely to titillate. Whereas the stuff that happens in schools and in libraries, the naked family sex show, these people going in and getting naked in front of the kids, and it's like, man, stuff like that, because it's sanctioned by the school, is more damaging.
And they read The Guardian and imagine it's news, and then they're not just propaganda, and then they get confused.
Porn is getting worse though, because I remember we're roughly the same age. I know you're technically younger.
A lot younger.
I better say it, otherwise you'd bring it up.
Thank you.
But when we were all growing up, stepmoms were the bad guys in Disney films. And somehow they're now in every porn clip that I seem to find. Why? Why would you rebrand
Steve, you know those
that?
clips are sort of targeted based on your previous history.
Really?
But also, how does porn make money? I've never paid, like, since it became available on the internet. I haven't paid a penny. Where are they getting the money
You've got to
from?
get on the Andrew Tate side of the equation. You did use the phrase since the dawn of time, which is one of his favourites. Anyway.
Let's move on
Yes,
before
let's move on.
we all get sued again. Saturday's Mail, Leo, and good news for single men, because the dating pool is about to get that little bit smaller.
So Britain's worst criminals who are facing whole life sentences will be banned from marrying thanks to new legislation. This is after news that Millie Dowler's murderer, Levi Belfield, planned to marry a regular female visitor at the prison that he's in Durham. And that prompted outrage. I mean, understandably. I just don't understand why women, want to marry these terrible men or throw themselves. Ted Bundy was the same. As soon as a man's a serial killer or something,
He's a good guy.
Yeah,
all that stuff.
She was introduced to Belfield through Peter Sutcliffe.
Obviously.
You think if somebody's going to run a dating agency that you're not going to trust, surely it's Peter Sutcliffe. But yeah, she says he's not a monster. He has a bad past. I mean, bad past. He's pretty much the worst.
He's made mistakes.
He's committed the worst possible crime you can possibly do. And I mean, I agree with this legislation. I don't think this is restricting freedoms.
And I'm guessing if he was into like matchmaking, his dating app would just be called Ripper, but without the R, just Ripper. That would be how the dating. Yeah.
When Peter Sutcliffe is your best man, you're in trouble. That's what I'm saying. But Leo, this could all be solved by. I'd hate to sound like a reactionary here, Steve. You know me, but death penalty solves all these problems.
I was thinking, not a blanket death penalty for any, but I mean, if it's a clearly proven
murder, absolutely proven.
Just the ones who want to get married. That'd sort it as well. Yeah. Death penalty for the murderers who want to get married gets rid of that, doesn't it? Sorts that out. Why not let them get
they
married?
wanted to get married if that led to the death penalty?
Well, then that solves that problem. You're right. You have found a solution
yeah.
to it. Yeah. Or let them get married so that they suffer too. How about that old chestnut? Better not, in case she's watching. Saturday's Times, Nick, and bad news for one of the UK's best exports, louts.
I took this one very personally. So this is not because of the lout part, I hasten to add, but because Brits are too grotty for Lanzarote. And that's where we used to go as kids. I mean, honestly, that's the last time I was happy, was as a child in Lanzarote. It was such a beautiful place. There was this guy called Hilario. He used to fall asleep on the Pecan. You know the Pecan? It's kind of like, it's like volcanic rock. They have it everywhere. It's like grass for them. But he had money, but he used to sleep out on it every night. I thought that was an amazing lifestyle. My point is that they want less UK people to come because they claim we're not as classy as Germans. What? So now I think we should boycott Lanzarote forever. It was the only place I liked. Now I'd never go there again.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, coming from Lanzarote. I mean, come on, you're not Monaco. You're not, Andorra. This is, you're just you're the sort of place that British people go on holiday, and that's why you're called.
Well, is it that you're the sort of place where grotty British people go on holiday, and that's why you think Brits are grotty?
Is there any other kind?
Well,
I mean, any British person on holiday immediately ties the handkerchief on their head, gets the string vest on, goes bright red and throws a plastic chair in the town fountain when they're drunk.
Yeah, that's classy, but some of those do that in a nice way. It's a good handkerchief.
It was better when there were just fewer people there travelling in general, but I still can't condone this pro-German propaganda.
Next, Leo, and we're on to the story of a woman who married herself. Fittingly, it's in The Independent.
So this internet influencer, which means no real job, she married herself and she's considered divorce after 24 hours in her own company. So, I mean, I don't know, I think I'd do the same with an internet influencer. So she's a 25-year-old, has over 500,000 followers on Twitter and Instagram. She bought a wedding dress and baked a cake to celebrate the day and try and generate some sort of spurious content to engage people and get clicks and likes, and now she's saying she's divorcing herself to get clicks and likes, and it worked because the press release she sent out got printed up in The Independent with barely any changes.
The thing is, it's always women who marry themselves in these stories. There's never been a bloke who wants to have a day that's not about him.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? A stag do, maybe, but the idea of wearing an uncomfortable suit and having to make a speech is no one's dream.
And there's a lot of questions unanswered. Will she get half her money, for example, is not answered here. I mean, marriage is collapsing, Steve. This is the proof. You've got all these men on the internet, ungenerously called incels, things like that. And they're saying, look, how can we really marry women when the divorce rate is so high and most are initiated by women? They're divorcing themselves now, Steve. It's the next level. Marriage is over.
Making a strong point. Saturday's Mail, Nick, and the British Dietetic Association has tried to get us to eat our words.
This is an annoying one. Don't use phrases pig out, eating like a horse, and wolfing down your dinner, because it makes obese people feel like animals, apparently, according to the Centre of Obesity Research. And they don't even want us to use terms like morbidly obese, which is a sort of medical term that probably saves lives. So it's the usual nonsense about body positivity. We don't have any other similar things. We should be supportive of people, but you don't have to celebrate things that are unhealthy. But this is where we've gone totally wrong in our culture. We don't believe anything's good and bad. And also, I feel bad for the pigs and horses and wolves, because they're much better than most of the people in the body positivity movement. So why should a pig? Why is it insulting to be compared to a pig? Pigs are intelligent, famously.
Yeah.
The pig should be insulted to be compared to some woke person.
Yeah, these fat activists standing up for, don't call us fat. It's got to be tough being a fat activist, by the way, because if you get too active, you might stop being so fat.
Yes.
But yeah, this woman, she said, I'm assuming it's a woman, it's never a bloke, is it? But she says, people who are living with obesity are made to feel gluttonous, which is discriminatory. Obesity is a long-term progressive relapsing condition with genetic, biological and social causes. No, it's not. There's all these causes. It's a disease. How come it wasn't around 50 years ago then? How come if it's genetic, how come we've just developed these genes? It's like, you don't have any condition. You've got an overactive pie arm. That's your problem, putting pies in your face. Overactive chewing.
At the risk of ruining what would have been a great climax to this, what happens if you've got a genetic predisposition towards if you were more likely to gain weight, but you were living during a time of famine, no one's fat, but you still have a genetic trait?
Right, so, why weren't you fat 50 years ago? You see pictures...
we didn't have the same available diet to us. Because we actually had food that came from farms, fewer from factories, whereas now most food is carbohydrate-laden factory-style.
You don't have to eat it. No, you don't have to eat it. And also, if you don't want to be called an animal, you know what separates humans from animals? Willpower, self-determination, delayed gratification. These are the sort of things that, a pig can't do, but a human can do. So exercise, some willpower.
A dog can do it as well. Sometimes you can say leave, and they do.
Yeah.
Well, coming up, how fashion shows are economic woes, why you shouldn't leave your work for a quick coffee, and Joe Rogan opens his own cancel culture comedy club. We'll see you soon.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. Saturday's Mail now, Leo, and in economic news, warning, skirts may go up as well as down.
So there's this thing called the hemline index, which was first dreamed up in the 1920s when I guess people wore long skirts, and also there was economic catastrophe. That says that this suggests when the economy is struggling, women's skirts get longer. I can't really see any, cause for that. If anything, they'd get shorter because you need less fabric and you're more likely to be working as a prostitute. But apparently it's true. At the moment, hemlines are getting longer in the world of fashion and economic times are getting tougher. And the article goes on for quite a long time talking about skirts. And I didn't read most of it.
This is an area of expertise for you.
Yeah, well, I'm a layman, Steve, in the area of evolutionary psychology, but it would seem to me, in times of economic hardship, a woman would go out of her way to attract a mate with resources, thus she would perhaps wear a shorter skirt, more chance of getting married to a rich guy or any guy. Why would you wear a longer skirt in times of economic hardship?
Maybe men are more attracted to women in long skirts as,
Could be that.
as a wife.
Could be that. Oh, as a wife material. Interesting, interesting theory.
Trad wife.
Yeah.
I think what we're watching here is when you guess science.
Yeah. I said I was a layman at the start, Steve.
Yeah.
I put a caveat in that you can't touch me on that.
This whole thing is guessing science. It's like
Well, they're
there's
saying that if in the longer skirts were considered a symbol of prosperity due to the cost of fabric post-war. So it's just like, look how much fabric I've got, guys. I'm absolutely loaded. So maybe it's that. I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder if there was a thing about cost of razors in there as well, because they're expensive. When you're in shaving legs, I guess if you don't shave legs, have a long skirt, it's a one-off cost, but it's paid dividends for me.
And you can turn the heating down as well, because you've got hairy legs.
So maybe when you guess science, sometimes it does pay off. Saturday's Express. Here's one bus driver that you wouldn't say thank you to on your way off the bus.
Yeah, this bus driver, I either sympathise with him or think it's the decline of the country. I can't decide. So this is a bus driver who was sacked for leaving passengers on board so he could grab a coffee. And you know what bus drivers are like? They take that break with the whole queue just waiting for them. And it takes an iron will. They just have a break with the whole queue staring at them thinking, when's the bus going to start? This is in London anyway. And they just turn it off and sit there. I always think that takes an iron will to enjoy your break with about 50 people hating you.
Yeah.
But this went a bit further, this guy, because he just went off, left the engine running, went off and had a break. Then they got onto him and said, why is the bus late? Then he said, you're bullying me. And then they said, well, are you self-suspending? And he said, no, you're bullying me, causing me stress, and I'm leaving. If I'm leaving, it's because of that. So he got into a kind of like workplace. This is the country now, people finding ways to not work. But I sympathise a little bit because bus driving looks quite hard. And, he had a short break. But then again, he does sound like a bit of a chancer. Yeah. He got in a lot of trouble since the start. I don't know. What do you think, Leo?
Well, then, if he gets fired, it's the sort of thing where he's not governor of the Bank of England. If they say, oh, you're fired, it's not going to be like, oh, no, what am I going to do now? Like, drive a milk float or something, there's...
Yeah. He could end up working in a coffee shop, and I think he'd be happier.
And then take his break on a bus.
Very good point. Saturday's Express, Leo, and there's an anti-cancel culture comedy club. So is Gary Lineker playing there?
Possibly. So Joe Rogan has opened an anti-cancel culture comedy club saying you can't fire me from his own club. So I don't know if people know this, but comedy is quite woke now. I know that's a word that gets, the use of it gets laughed at, but really what it means is everybody has to adhere to these boilerplate opinions, and if you stray outside them or question them, as a comedian should do, you get cancelled. It happened to Nick. It's happened to me to a lesser extent because I'm funnier live. So Joe Rogan has started this anti-cancel culture comedy club called Comedy Mothership. Sounds a lot like Comedy Unleashed. So there's an anti-cancel culture comedy club in the UK, in London and Leeds. You can buy tickets to me doing Hate and Live there improvised hatred on, I think it's April the 26th.
Nice. You wouldn't get that on the BBC.
Yeah, just round the corner from the cinema.
Just to counter Leo's point, you think the most edgy, funny comment would be the one more cancelled. Anyway, but it doesn't matter.
I knew you were sat waiting for the comeback.
I was going to say something straight away, but I'm not feeling very well. Basically, Leo's right. This is a lot like Comedy Unleashed, and people will say, "Oh, Rogan with his stupid." They always mock things like Comedy Unleashed, and I'm sure they'll mock this. But of course, you do end up with the need for that. It's sad because you end up with a fractured culture where you just have people in this corner laughing at that, and then the wokesters over there laughing at that. It's a pity we can't come together, but this is the way it is. So you do wonder how far it will go. Will Rogan have on Owen Benjamin, who sort of went to live in the woods and dedicated hours of live streams to attacking Joe Rogan? How cancelled can you be and still get on Rogan's club? You know what I mean? Is it like, because you could be so cancelled. Would the comedy equivalent of R. Kelly be allowed to play the club? Probably not.
Yeah.
Because that's a criminal.
Well, because most comedians are the comedy equivalent of R. Kelly.
Well, there's that. I couldn't think of a comedy example that wasn't too controversial to use. So.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Saturday's Independent, Nick. And my son turns 1 this week, which means this news story is about 12 months too late to help.
Yeah, so Seth Rogen claims having no children made him more successful. And there's a clip going around. I happened to watch it today. People were calling him the man version of Chelsea Handler because Chelsea Handler just had that clip about, hey, my life's so great without kids. Now Seth Rogen, the famous actor, is having a similar opinion. And it all comes down to quite selfish reasons. He says here, we get to do whatever we want. We're in the prime of our lives. We're smarter than we've ever been, which for Seth Rogen still means not that smart because he comes out with lots of rubbish opinions. But he's saying, look, it's great. I've seen my friends have kids. And I'm very clear on this. I don't have kids, probably never will, but I totally believe in the family and think everyone else should. I've just not managed it. But
Why would you not have kids? Is there something wrong?
Yeah, there's something wrong with me, yeah. But it's not medical. It's purely my personality. But I'm not one of these people like, this is cope. It's called cope now on the internet. It's people like Seth Rogen and Chelsea, and they go, no, I'm so great not having kids. I'm so cool. I hate people with kids. I'm brilliant. It's like, no, just stop it.
Yeah.
You should have kids. And also for the birth rates, you need to have kids as well. So I don't, but I'm not saying it's a good thing. That's the difference, whereas Rogan is, but he's wrong.
Yeah, and also he doesn't know. He says, oh, I'm happy not having kids, and it's great because I can do all this stuff. He doesn't have kids. I've got a daughter. I never thought I'd have kids. And then I met an amazing woman, and we decided to have kids. And maybe not as soon as we did, but, we got this baby, and it's the most. You've got a baby. It's the most. I never experienced the sort of pure joy like it, and it's really like fun, and it's so much fun. Yeah. And now I can do exactly what I want because all I want to do is like play with her and like listen to her laugh.
You've never cared about another human being.
They do get better as well. You definitely shouldn't. I also didn't think I'd ever want to have kids, and then you get to an age where I just thought, okay, and now because until about a week ago, he wasn't as much as being good at interacting. Like I could build the building blocks and he just knocked them down, and that's all we did for months. And now he can actually, like a couple of days ago, he could stack 2, and a few days later he's stacking about 4 until I knock them down and see how he likes. And it's the only way they'll learn. But he's almost walking every single thing he does. You go like, that's kind of brill. You should get one, Nick. Yeah, I think you can get them off the internet. Madonna did something like that.
I'm just too busy, Steve, unfortunately. But I've taken it on board, and I'll do what I can by next week.
Well, we can open up an appeal if you'd like to mother a child with... Well, either way. The show's nearly over, so let's take another look at the front pages from Saturday. The Daily Mail, mutiny at BBC over Lineker red card. Telegraph, BBC faces revolt over Lineker. Guardian, Lineker suspended from BBC over social media row. Express, Rishi's £478 million deal. I said we would stop boats. The Times, mutiny of the day, gets Star support. And finally, the Daily Star, the Beeb's gone to VAR, and those were your front pages. That's all we've got time for. Thank you to my guests, Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. Tune in tomorrow when we'll have Leo will be returning with Josh Howie. Now, remember, if you are watching the 5 a.m. repeat, then stay tuned for the breakfast show just after the break. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much for going through the newspapers of Saturday, and we will return tomorrow at 11. More of the same.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Good evening, team. It's 7 o'clock and I'm Lawrence Fox. Tonight, I am looking at Drag Queen Story Hour. You've probably heard something about it recently, as a parent, I want to make sure that children are safe and not exposed to content or performances that aren't suitable, or am I just overreacting? I'll be talking to two people on opposing Ofcom compliance sides about it. Then you can get to put Fox on the spot and ask me anything you want. Never works out well, does it, that one? And finally, I dish it out with senior risk meteorologist Jim Dale and talk about climate change and if it is really the end of the world as we know it. And don't forget, most importantly, I want to hear from you. Send your views my way at gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's all coming up after headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Lauren, thank you and good evening. It's 1 minute past 7. This is the latest from the GB newsroom.
The BBC has told Gary Lineker to step back from presenting Match of the Day until an agreement has been reached on his social media usage. It follows comments he made on Twitter criticising the government's new asylum policy. He likened the language used to that of 1930s Germany. Well, the BBC have said it considered his, quote, recent social media activity to be a breach of our guidelines. And in a statement, the broadcaster also said, "We have never said that Gary can't have a view on issues that matter to him, but he should keep well away from taking sides on party political issues or political controversies." Football commentators Alan Shearer and Ian Wright have said on Twitter they won't join this Saturday's show in a move of solidarity with Mr. Lineker. In other news, and Rishi Sunak has agreed to give France almost £500 million over the next 3 years in an attempt to end the Channel migrant crisis. The Prime Minister held talks with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris today before announcing the landmark deal, which will see a new detention centre established in France. The joint news conference followed the first bilateral summit between the two countries in 5 years. Mr. Sunak says the new illegal migrant legislation introduced this week supports this new deal.
We're announcing a new detention centre in northern France, a new command centre bringing our enforcement teams together in one place for the first time, and an extra 500 new officers patrolling French beaches, all underpinned by more drones and other surveillance technologies that will help ramp up the interception rate. And the legislation the UK has introduced this week supports this, because it's designed to break the business model of the criminal gangs and remove the pull factors bringing them to the Channel coast.
The Labour leader has discussed his plans to prioritise Scottish innovation to boost the economy. Sir Keir Starmer is in Glasgow today with Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves. He says Scotland's creativity has been held back by governments at